Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Startup Central on ET now, and let's put the spotlight on Apple. The company's sales in China have slipped 0.3%, while rival Huawei has posted 42% surge in the third quarter of 2024. In fact, competition in the smartphone space in the country is intensifying, particularly even as Huawei is gaining significant ground and challenging the tech giant, and that in the world's largest smartphone market. In fact, in terms of market share as well, if you see IDC data, Apple has reached second place with a 15.6% market share, while Huawei claimed its third place, but it's just slightly behind Apple with a 15.2% market share. Apple, remember, has faced additional headwinds in China. That includes restrictions on iPhones used by some government agencies. And even as Apple faces challenges in maintaining market share against domestic rivals in China, Apple CEO Tim Cook has said that the tech giant plans to increase its investment in the country. In fact, Cook recently met with government officials in China reportedly, and to discuss what's behind this Apple's China handshake, we now have Tarun Pathak, the research director at Counterpoint Research, joining us. Thank you very much, Tarun, for joining us this evening on Startup Central. I want to first understand from you, Huawei seems to be gaining ground in China, and Apple's catching up with Apple's sales. And China really hasn't given concessions to Apple. So in that context, and in the context of the US-China tech rivalry, help us understand Tim Cook's visit to the country, what's behind that, and what's likely to happen for the tech brand in the country.
Thanks, Sumit. I think a very, very important point. So if you look at China is a very highly competitive market. In fact, the top four players are separated by just 1% in market share, right? And Apple continues to be China continues to be a very, very important market for Apple. If you look at in terms of overall sale, it is close to like 1/5, and very important part of the Apple's value chain as well. So it is not just an important market for Apple products like iPhone, but at the same time, a very important market from the value chain perspective. Now, the point is, another angle that Apple is also looking at is the Apple Intelligence. So if you look at, we have seen Apple has not rolled out the Apple Intelligence in countries like China. They are saying we are going and meet the laws of the land. And I think there are a lot of things that needs to be done over there. So it's a very important visit, especially when the supply chains, global value chains are realigning. Things are improving in India as well. So we believe that Apple's commitment to China will continue to remain. But at the same time, we need to see what are the areas they will have more cooperation going forward in terms of their product and services in mainland China.
Absolutely, Tarun. But the most important question is, what does it really mean for India? Because even though China, like you said, is a big market for Apple, it is the world's biggest smartphone market. And even though the company may be looking at China, but it is also looking at diversifying to markets like India. We've also seen Tim Cook visit the country in the first half of this year. And of course, we've only seen investments grow, whether it is in terms of, exports from the country are concerned, or partnering with several other supply chain partners in India.
Yes, I don't see any like you can say a distinctive comparison in a sense, like because for Apple, India is just catching up in a sense, like 5 years back, we just have 1% or 2% share of the global Apple manufacturing. Now we are more than 11 to 12%. So in terms of manufacturing or assembling iPhones here, things are pretty solid, and that will remain same for the next 2 or 3 years for Apple in India. But it's just a matter of the realignment of value chains. Maybe in China, Apple will continue to look for high value chain, things like what I just mentioned, Apple Intelligence, maybe more localization of the components going forward. But in India, like we mentioned, like if you look at from the India perspective, it is more about assembling as of now, very much centered towards iPhone, but maybe in the next couple of years, Apple will start to diversify beyond iPhones, and then we can look into products like Macs, AirPods, iPads as well. So a lot needs to be done in India, which has just started in the last couple of years. So I don't see a direct impact or comparison between India and China as of now, because both have a very separate place as of now in Apple value chain. And we have seen post-pandemic, everyone has started to diversify their value chains, which will remain true for not just Apple but other companies as well.
Absolutely, Tarun, and that becomes even more interesting because the heads of both the countries, that is India and China, met recently in Russia, and of course, like you said, that Apple might be wooing China, but that's not going to impact its India operations or the investments in India operations, which stand at currently, according to what you said, at 11 to 12% of Apple's manufacturing coming in from India. On that note, thank you very much for joining us to discuss this story. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen.
There comes a time when your heart calls for you to arise. Plant your feet solid into the ground. Decide your own limits. And then break right through them. Become something more. It's my time to rise.